Hello, what is going on? In today's video, I want to talk about complications and I want to talk about rising action. And those are actually pretty much the same thing. When you have rising action in a story, it's because the situation is getting more complicated for the protagonist. And I will be using Max swings to the fences for this quite a bit. So English teachers love to show a graph like this, where the story starts out kind of flat, and that is the part we'll talk about soon called exposition. But then something happens that causes the protagonist or the main character to have a more difficult life than what they had at the beginning. Oftentimes, remember, this is art. Whenever you're writing a story, sometimes these rules are broken, and they can be done really well when they're broken. But typically, for a short story or a novel or even a movie, at the beginning, you have kind of a flat area. You're getting to know the character. You're getting to know the backstory. It's called exposition. Let's talk about exposition right now. Why don't we talk about exposition right now? So in Max Swings to the Fences, some of the exposition or backstory is he has just moved from New York. We don't see that happen. We're told that it happens. So that's backstory. He was born. I mean, that's a bad example of exposition, but we don't see that happen either. We'll later find out that Max's mom and dad are separated. That's exposition. That has impacted Max's life. We don't see that. So exposition is the very beginning of a story, a movie, a novel, where you're getting to know the character. If it's done well, it can be exciting. If it's not done well, exposition can be kind of just boring because you're getting information about the character, backstory, we like to say. But then something will happen that causes the protagonist's life to get more difficult. And as it becomes more and more difficult, that's what we call rising action. That's what we call complications. Sometimes there's a fine line between exposition and complications. I would say that part of the exposition is that it is February and Max is going to be a new kid in the middle school. You could also argue that that's a complication. If he moved, remember, complicated, it makes his life more difficult. So if he was going to school at the beginning of the year as a new kid, it wouldn't be as complicated as going in February. So that makes it more difficult. The author made the protagonist's life more difficult by putting him in the middle of the year. Another thing that you should mention or you should be aware of when you're reading stories is that we like to see people when their life is not going well. That makes for better stories, better movies. More complications, the better. Max is self-conscious about his ears. That's a complication. But a turning point in Max Swings to the Fences is when he tells that lie. That's when we really get the rising action going, and that's when the complications happen more and more. And I don't want to talk too much about too many complications because then we get into spoiler alert territory. But one of the first major complications after Max tells that lie is that Molly tells Jenny. And we know that Jenny has a big mouth. And Molly knows that Jenny has a big mouth. So a huge complication for Max that makes his life so much worse is that now Jenny knows. If Molly had kept that to herself and it was just a story between Max and Molly, it might not be as good a story as Jenny knowing. And I don't want to spoil what happens after Jenny knows. But the stakes are going to keep getting higher and higher. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but when we talk about complication, we'll maybe talk more about it during the Zooms, but it almost seems like this, like we are building towards the climax. I won't talk about climax in this video right now, but we are building towards some big event in Max Swings for the Fences. And as some people said in the Zoom, I don't want to say it here, but like you can kind of predict, like he tells the lie, what you can predict what could the climax be. You have maybe 4 or 5 choices, but that'll be it for today. We just talked about exposition and complications. If you have any questions about either of these, make sure you get with me in a Zoom, or maybe get with me in a Google Meet while people are working during the Zoom, and that's a good way for us to be able to talk one-on-one. Thanks for watching. See you next time.